have in the room here. I am going to kind of burst your bubble. I think everybody is here to hear what's the big secret about caregiving and how can we get it and where's going to be the best place to go. And this is really to tell you that it's very hard out there to find a good place. And it is very cost prohibitive, but I think this is something that everybody needs to know, so that you are aware when the time comes. So we will start talking about it here, hopefully. There we go. Okay, so if you are at home, you have a couple different options when we're talking about hiring help in the home. There's something called companion care and then something else called personal care. So when you're calling agencies, you kind of need to know the difference or what your needs are. You need to be ready to say to them, these are the specific needs that I have for my person at home. So companion care is just that, being a companion. They will offer companionship, conversation. They can do some meal prep. And not just meal prep for that day. Like you could always ask them, like, can you make a lasagna so they can put it in the refrigerator and maybe eat off of it for a few days or things like that. They can do medication reminders, meaning, hey, Mrs. Smith, it's time for you to take your pills, but they can't give the pills. Okay, so if someone that has ALS has limited mobility with their hands, they cannot give it to them. They cannot put it in their mouth, none of that. They can do some grooming, brush their hair, that sort of thing, and they can help tell them, like, put one leg in the pant, and this is how you pull your pants up, or that sort of thing. But they are not dressing the person. They can do light housekeeping, dusting, vacuuming, that sort of thing. They can do laundry. And most of those places can provide transportation. So maybe you want them to take you to the drugstore or to the grocery store or something like that. So companion care is very good for people that really are still highly functioning, but maybe they live by themselves and they need some extra attention. They need somebody to stay with them for a little bit while the caregiver wants to go play around the golf or something like that. So it's not any kind of personal care.
Hey, Jeannie, can you mention we'll send this out?
Yeah, we'll send all of this out. You don't have to. Yeah, we have all your email addresses. We'll email all of it. Yeah. Yeah.
We use Alexa a lot. Alexa, remind me this.
Yes, yes.
So it really kind of helps.
Yes, yes. And this will also, we're recording this now, so it'll be up on our website as well. So personal care, those things that our ALS patients are going to need, right? They can assist with bathing, dressing, grooming, all of those sorts of things. Help them with mobility assistance. So if they need help with a walker, if they need to transfer into a power wheelchair, even with a Hoyer, those sorts of things, they can do that sort of thing. Obviously transferring like with a Hoyer or anything like that, if they need the assistance of one person, that person can help them with that. Positioning in bed, positioning in chairs, that sort of thing. They can assist them with toileting, going to the bathroom. Maybe they can get into the bathroom, but maybe they can't wipe well. They can help with that. If they are incontinent, they can change briefs, that sort of thing. Obviously, they can cook a meal, but they can also assist with feeding. Now, feeding typically is limited to oral feeding. They don't do tube feedings. However, there are some agencies that will provide that. So if you have a patient that does have a feeding tube and you want that, you need to specifically ask about that if that's an option that they would provide for you. Usually what that comes down to is a nurse comes out and trains the aide that is in the home to be able to do it. And that nurse provides a supervisory visit every once in a while to make sure things are going okay. Obviously, they can do oral hygiene, so brushing their teeth, as well as other hygiene needs. And if they are completely bedbound, they can do bed baths, things like that, change the sheets underneath them, all of that sort of thing. So in a nutshell, if ALS patients need care at home, we're probably looking at personal care, not companion care. So there's two very different things there, right? So if you're calling an agency, you're asking for personal care, not companion care. So how do you pay for this? Home care is an out-of-pocket expense. It is not covered by Medicare or private health insurance. Now, some people will say, but wait a minute, I've had home health come into my home after I've had surgery or something like that. That is a limited benefit that Medicare pays for when you have a specific need for a very limited period of time. And usually it's because you've had a surgery or something like that, and there is a skilled need that has to happen. A skilled need is a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, a nurse. Maybe you have a wound and a dressing needs changed on that wound. If the nurse comes out and is providing that wound care, and then she says, you know, I think you could have help with a bath a couple times a week, she might add on a bath aid to that service request that she has for that wound care. But it's going to be a limited period of time. As soon as that skilled need comes out of the house, so does the aid. So it is a very specific period of time that Medicare will pay for something in the home or, you know, your private health insurance. Now, if a patient has Medicaid, or in our case in Arizona, it's called Access, or if we have Altex, which is the Arizona Long-Term Care Plan, then there is some benefit for home care, but it's usually based on a financial requirement, and you have so many hours based on, you know, your level of need financially for that. But even I think at that level, people that meet the top level for care under Altex or Access, I think it maybe maxes out at 40 hours a week. So you're still not getting a ton of care, right? And then obviously long-term care insurance does cover home care, but many people do not have long-term care insurance. If you do have long-term care insurance, there is usually a caveat on there that says you have a 30, 60, or 90-day period where you have to pay out of pocket before the benefit kicks in. So if you have a long-term care plan, I would review that, because let's just say it's the best and it's 30-day plan. You still have to pay out of pocket for 30 days. So I tell patients all the time, start getting that when you don't need very much, so that out-of-pocket expense is as little as it can be for you for that first 30 days. Don't wait until you need 8 hours of care 3 days a week, and then all of that's coming out of pocket for you for 30 days. Most long-term care plans have a 90-day benefit. You're going to pay more for your monthly premium to get that 30-day coverage.
Janie, can I just note that also on long-term care policies, some of them have different price points for what they'll reimburse for in-home care versus care in a community or a facility. So you'll want to make sure to look at that, because sometimes it's only half of the actual benefit to cover the in-home care.
Yeah. Okay, so there are some Valley resources that we have. In-home care usually has some sort of a minimum shift requirement. Since COVID happened, it got a lot worse because they have a hard time finding aides that want to work. So lots of the home care agencies require a 4-hour minimum shift, and sometimes they will require 20 hours a week as a minimum. So that can get costly right there. You can see right there that on average, they start at $32 an hour. There are some agencies that will go as low as 1 hour a day if you want to start that low, but typically they have a higher rate for that 1 hour, and sometimes it can be as much as $60 for 1 hour. So it can be very costly very quickly. If we're talking about ventilation, if you do choose to be trached and vented and you need a nurse, number one, you have to have a nurse. If you have a vent, it's not an aide, it's a nurse that has to be trained on a vent. There are only 2 agencies in town. They both start at $85 an hour for a nurse. So some of them will charge for mileage. If you live in an outlying area, they might say, well, we're a valley-based agency, but you live in Camp Verde or, that sort of thing. We're going to charge you mileage on top of that to have the aide come to your house. I will have a flyer for you at the end that has a few agencies in town. The list is short. There are a ton of agencies out there, so I don't want you to feel limited to this list that we have, but the list is comprised of agencies that previous or current ALS patients are using, and they liked the company. That's why I put them on the list. So it is a short list, but at least you have some that patients feel good about. Okay, I'm going to turn it over here to Rami now. She's with New Day Lifestyles. They are placement agents, and they're going to talk to you about if we don't do a home care option, what about placement? There are all different options for placing someone, and what does that look like? We're going to talk about cost and all of those sorts of things. So turn it over to Rami.
Hi, I'm Rami Kiros with New Day Lifestyles, and my partner Julia is over here in the audience as well. So when it comes to senior living options, we have a few that we can choose from. The first one is independent living. Oh, am I?
I think you can go to the
okay.
next.
How do
one,
I?
maybe.
Do I have
Just
an
hit
arrow
the-
or just the mouse? Okay. There we go. Okay, so we've got different types of senior living options. I'm not sure if I can. There we go. Okay, so independent living, we have large and small. So large independent living communities, and independent means just that. You are independent. You don't need any help with anything except maybe meals, a little bit of housekeeping. Many of us are not going to fall into this category if we have an ALS diagnosis. Every once in a while we do to start, but just know that they cannot provide any kind of personal care, any kind of supervisory care even. If there is a fall, it's a 911 call because they don't have any licensing to provide any care. Nobody really checks in on you. Some of them have a little daily check-in and maybe one meal a day, but it's really not what we're looking for. It is a retirement community for socialization and activity, which is also very important. But if you need that care, it's not going to be there for you. Oh, oops. Wrong one. There we go. So yeah, independent here. And then assisted living. So this could be in 2 different types of environments. You've got your large assisted living communities where there could be anywhere from 30 some to 200 and some residents. They can provide different levels. We've got supervisory care, kind of what Janie was talking about for in-home care or personal care, all the way up to directed care. In your large assisted living communities, they have a personal care license. So that means they can provide all of those activities of daily living. They can help change you. They can help with, medications, bathing, incontinence care. However, what they can't do is feeding. So Janie had mentioned, if you lose mobility in your upper extremities or need a tube feed, assisted living in a large community cannot provide the self-feeding. It's in their licensing that they can't allow somebody who needs feeding in their dining room. So it would be the responsibility of the family or a friend or someone to feed if your loved one can no longer self-feed. And that would have to happen in their apartment. So typically what we recommend when the time comes for that, or a tube feed is a smaller residential care home assisted living facility. These are all licensed for directed care, meaning they can direct whatever kind of care you need. So they are able to feed you, they're able to do your tube feed, they are able to do total care, whether you're laying in a bed or sitting in a chair. They can provide everything when you can no longer direct your own care. That's where directed care comes from. And they can physically put the medications into your mouth or into your tube feed. One thing that I didn't mention here. How do I go back?
I don't know.
No. So,
well, we can't see anything on the left.
No, that's okay. I just saw that you had listed. Oh, hold on. Let's see here. I've got it. I have it here. Oh, so some of the things that they can do in the assisted living communities or the care homes is bring in all of your services. So ALS is wonderful in helping you get transportation to your clinic or your ALS doctor, but if you need something like a dentist or a mobile doctor, x-rays, maybe there's a sign of an infection, in the communities and care homes, we can bring all those services to you. So you can have a primary care physician and they can order anything you need. So that takes a lot of the burden off of the family. Same with medications, they just get delivered right there to the community. So when your loved ones come to visit, everything will be taken care of and they can just be your family and enjoy visiting. We kind of went over these. Directed care was the last one that I had kind of focused on, but this is also something that we'll see in a memory care type environment, which most of us don't have the need for that, but that's where directed care comes into place as well. So as we mentioned, we've got the big and the large, or big and small facilities. And some of the highlights here, the differences that you're going to definitely have more activity in the large environment and socialization, and you'll have transportation. In the small environment, it's a lot more intimate and can provide a much higher level of care. So typically in a larger environment, you're going to have maybe 1, 2, 3 caregivers and a med tech for maybe 30, 40 residents. In a smaller environment, you're going to have maybe 5 to 10 residents and 2 to 3 caregivers, depending on their acuity and their staffing. So the ability to provide more of that directed, not quite one-on-one care, but more personalized care is going to happen in a smaller environment. They're all going to provide 3 meals a day in assisted living. In the smaller environments, you're not going to have the transportation, but as we mentioned, almost all of the services can come to you, and then family can still pick you up. If you're able to get in and out of a car or a transport van, there's lots of options for that as well.
So you had mentioned with the large versus small, they cannot assist with the tube feeding or feeding. And you said you can have a friend or family member. Are you also allowed to hire nursing care within a large facility?
So that is tricky. There are maybe 1 or 2 here and there that will have conversations and they'll say, yeah, you can bring in a nurse. But then that particular nurse who seems okay with it might leave the facility. And then the next nurse that comes in that's hired by that facility might not be comfortable with that. Really, at the end of the day, their licensing doesn't cover anything to do with the tube feed. So let's say we have a husband and wife living together and the husband can do the tube feed because he's been taught by it. Sometimes they might be okay with it, but I would say 95% of the time they're not, because if something were to happen, they can't do anything with it. So it would be a 911 call. They just can't take on the liability. It's too much of a risk for them. In the smaller care homes, there's a lot more people, and there are a lot more care that they can provide. And because they have that directed care, they can do one-on-one training, and there's more consistency with the staff. So that's why their licensing covers it versus the large community.
So she couldn't hire her own personal nurse to come in and do the feeding.
So in a large community, it's just tricky. Okay. Sometimes they'll say, okay, like we just had this, we were just touring with someone with ALS. 1 out of 6 communities said, yeah, you can hire a personal nurse and we'll be okay with it. But most of the time they don't allow that. And that also gets really expensive, because if you're paying, let's say for a high level of care like that, you need tube feeds. So you probably need a lot of care. You're looking at roughly $8,000 to $10,000 plus a month. And then on average, like Janie said, a private nurse is $85 an hour. And then to find somebody to come, if you need tube feeding every 4 hours, if it's continuous, there's a lot that goes into it thinking wise. So
okay, and
yeah.
then also we're just figuring out all of the vocabulary here.
Yeah.
Does small mean group home, or is there something else you're referring to?
Small usually means residential care home or group home, where there's 5 to 10 residents and then 2 to 3 caregivers. Large could be anywhere from 30. There are some communities that are only 30, 35 residents, onwards up to 200 residents. And there's a fit in there for everyone. When we help our families, we try to plan for the long term, kind of talk about everything that's to come. But sometimes what you need right now is not what you need down the road. And that's okay, as long as you know that it might mean another move down the road. We've got a lot of people that are very independent, cognizant, young, and being in a smaller residential group home to start, when you don't need assistance with feeding or you don't have tube feeds, that might not be the best fit to start out. But when the time comes, those options are there for you.
There are some really nice group homes.
Yes, yeah, it has a, yeah, it used to be nursing home, and then these group homes that a lot of people think are like a halfway house, but they're really not. I mean, the houses are bigger and more beautiful than the one that I live in. And it's, for us, it's really about the care, really the care and the companionship. So you're going to get companionship. Are you going to get, bingo and music and, happy hours every day like you are in a larger community? No, you're not going to get that. There's going to be some that have more activity than others. And that's what Julia and I do, is really try to meet people where they're at in finding those resources. But as the residents change in every community and every group home, the kind of the flow of the community and group home changes too. So it's never going to be perfect, but really at the end of the day, if you can have that peace of mind and trust that your loved one is being cared for, that's going to be the most important. Briefly, we mentioned skilled nursing facility. So a lot of times people, when they get to a point of needing 24-hour care, and it's more of a care need versus a social need in a senior living community, sometimes you'll hear, well, do I need to go to skilled nursing? Skilled nursing has kind of taken on 2 roles now. We've got a short-term skilled nursing, which is maybe 20 days, Medicare will pay for a rehab stay. They do some rehab, physical occupational therapy, nursing care, 24/7 nursing care, doctor visits. But when it comes to being in a skilled nursing 24 hours a day, really you're much better off, honestly, to be in a residential care home for many reasons. The skilled nursing setting, they are overworked, underpaid, understaffed. So even though there's a nurse there 24/7, you're not getting cared for by the nurse 24/7. You've maybe got one CNA running to, 15 rooms. So it's not as intimate as an environment and as much care as a residential care home. Plus the cost, as it says here, is very prohibitive. Nursing homes run anywhere from $350 to almost $500 a day now, which that is a lot of money, $9,000 to $12,000 a day, and that's 3 meals a day and care, and basically you're laying in a bed. So that doesn't come with physical therapy or anything else that you get when you're there for a rehab stay that your Medicare is paying for. And we can find really good residential care homes for half that price or even less. The average cost of a residential care home, depending on the area of the valley, I would say if we're looking for a private room, $4,500 on up, keeping in mind this is 24-hour care, and the care that's going to come with someone with ALS is pretty significant. So are there cheaper options? Sure, but not much. $3,500 for a shared room is pretty much what we're getting. The state pays somewhere between $3,500 to $4,500 for people with care. So that's kind of what some of these places base their rates on. And that's for a shared room. So that it's a lot to take in, but somebody providing 24-hour care, all your meals, your room and board and electric, all that stuff. It sounds expensive, but if you're looking to bring somebody into your home for 24 hours a day, that's going to be about $25,000 a month. So $5,000 to $25,000 a month is a pretty significant difference in cost. And then the nursing home in the middle, about $12,000. So things to consider: location, budget, amenities, care needs. That's what we talk about when we're helping people. We will meet with you. We'll have an assessment. We'll be talking with the team here, kind of see where you're at and try to meet you where you're at, and take into consideration everything that is happening with care, and then everything that's that you need socially as well.
Thank you. So I just want to bring up also the fact that we have many families who stay home, right? They can be trained, it's not the end of the world, and many people do stay home and do it on their own. But what tends to happen is if we're getting to the point where you are paying for home care to come into the home and it's nickel and diming you, and you're getting to that point where you're like, oh my gosh, this is a lot every month that we're paying out, and it's still only covering me 4, 5, 6 hours a day, and I'm still the primary caregiver all that other time, then we are looking at those other options. You've got several options there. I still personally love group homes. Here's the other reason why I like them. Number one, in the state of Arizona, they are limited to 10 residents, right? That's what their license holds. So they cannot have more than that. So if you just think about it, how often are 10 people going to need to go to the bathroom at the same time, right? Like, you're probably going to have more individualized care when you need it in that group home setting, number one. Number two, I've very rarely had a group home that will not let me come in and individually train the staff on what that ALS patient needs. They're very open, even if they don't know what ALS is, they are very open to letting us come in and say, teach us, tell us what we need to know. And it may need to happen multiple times. If a person moves in when they're still using a walker, and then 6 months, a year down the road, we're talking about a power wheelchair and a Hoyer lift, that still needs, some more training maybe. They're very accommodating to whatever the patient needs. They're usually very accommodating to families coming in any hour of any day, whereas sometimes those larger facilities are like, we've got hours, get out. And you don't necessarily like that all the time, right? If your person isn't doing so well, maybe you want to stay later at night, or those sorts of things. So we take those things into consideration. So when we have a person who is contemplating placement, the first thing that we usually do is set you up with Julia and Ramy. They talk about things like, obviously, budget. What is your budget? What area of town are you looking at? You certainly, if you can afford it, don't want somebody to be in the West Valley if you live in the East Valley, right? So where do you want in the Valley? And then also, like, what is your person like? Are they introverted and they don't want to be in a group home that has lots of activities, or are they very social and they really want to have a lot of activity? Do they want to be in a place that has more women than men, or vice versa? Or I remember, this has been several years back, but I had an ALS patient who was a retired lawyer, and we found a group home that had a retired judge in it, and they were like fast friends. Like they just loved each other. So I mean, they got in a few squabbles, but it worked out perfectly. So we take those things into account. So that's kind of Ramy and Julia's job. Is, what was your person into? What were their hobbies? What were their interests? What are their interests? What do they want to do? Get that match going. Then where I come in is, what kind of medical care do they need? And we ask those kinds of questions. Like, you guys don't know all the questions to ask when you go out. Something that's very important to me is their staff awake at night? Right? Like, not every group home has staff awake. They have staff there, but they let the staff sleep at night. Well, if I have a patient that can't push a call light, then I want awake staff that's making rounds, checking on my people, right? So it just depends. I had a guy in a group home one time, and he was an ALS patient, and he could press his button, but the staff was asleep, and they were asleep upstairs. And he had to push his horn on his power wheelchair to wake them up. And he was a night owl. He didn't want to go to bed until like midnight or whatever, and they were already in bed. So it became very problematic. So those are questions that we want to ask the group home. And even though you think that that's something very little, it can cause a very big problem. And our intention is, if you are making that decision to move a person, we only want to move once. We don't want to move and have you get an eviction notice, and they can do that. If for any reason, every contract says that, if for any reason they decide things aren't going their way, they can give you a 30-day notice, and you got to find another place. And that's not fun. So we really want to try to find a place. And we're all dealing with a lady right now who is moving from Florida. She has ALS, and she's a bulbar patient. She's declining rather quickly, and she is stomping and kicking her feet about wanting independent living. Now, I don't think we have to burst the bubble at all, because there's no independent living that will take this woman, because she needs care. But we have to tell her, there's no way we're going to put you in a place that in 30 days or less, we're going to have to move you again, right? So we're going to try to set her up with the most appropriate place that can keep her permanently, so that she doesn't have to move again. sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow, to hear like I need more care than what I think I do, but it's going to be much better than if she gets a little more debilitated and then we have to go through a move. That's very fatiguing for the patient, for the family, for everything else. So we try to keep all of those things in mind when we're thinking about placement, even if they're pretty good right now. What is the end stage scenario so that we can keep them in one place? So,
and I know that it's really hard as families to see your loved one in a certain place. A group home versus a community, because you want to see them thriving, you want to see them as they were and not as they are. And we can try to match those needs as best as we can, like Janie said. But, moves are hard. One time is hard, and then to do it multiple times. Sometimes we got to go with the season that we're in, and that is a more independent season with a little bit of, personal care and some activities. Knowing that it's going to be a difficult transition down the road, and that's okay. We just try to provide the education for that. But ideally, one move is what you'll hear us being proponents of.
Definitely. Questions? No questions? Like, oh, we hate it. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a respite stay, and we have a guy right now, not ALS, but something else, that his wife is primary caregiver, and every year she goes around her birthday to spend a week and a half with her family, and every year she calls us up and says, "Okay, it's time. I need I need somewhere to go." And so, yes, they do. It's a lot of work. So they prefer it to be a month or two, because it's doctor's orders and TB tests and all sorts of things for, 10 days is a lot of work for everybody involved. But there's a lot of options for that, and it gives us it gives family a little break, and it gives us, gives the patients kind of a little sense of what to expect. Yeah.
Kind of a follow-up to that, then they aren't normally full, so that they don't want to accept that extra person just for
Well, sometimes it kind of ebbs and flows. Sometimes people will pass or move back out of state with different families, and so they have availabilities at different times. And so nailing down a time is very important, and then we look around that time period. So to say I want to go and move in July or August, we won't know what the availability is yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the individual that we've done this 3 summers in a row now, it's been a different home each time, and they've had a good experience each time, but the same home wasn't available each time. Yeah.
For the smaller homes,
Mm-hmm.
When things progress, do they have to move them to skilled nursing?
Good question. No, they shouldn't have to. In my mind, there's never really a need that for that skilled nursing care, unless it is months and months of IV antibiotics and huge wounds and stuff like that. That doesn't usually happen. They have the directed care, which in Arizona is the highest license. In other states, it's a little different. So if you are from another state or have family somewhere else, skilled nursing is typically where a lot of people go. In Arizona, there are thousands of group homes that Julia and I check out. We look at their DHS reports. We go in, we know the staff, we get to know them and build a relationship. So we know how they're going to care for our clients. Because again, that's the number one thing. So when we're looking for ALS, we want to know, can you do the tube feed? Will you allow education to come in? Can you do a Hoyer lift? What does it look like for nighttime staff? Frequent turns, that sort of thing. An electric wheelchair, because there are some group homes that won't allow a power wheelchair, and we know most of our family members or ourselves will have a power wheelchair, and some won't allow it. So we ask all those questions ahead of time so that you don't have to move to another level of care. And we stay involved and we stay connected with the team here and with you to help kind of overcome any barriers that there might be. Every ALS patient that we've come into, that we've gotten to know has different needs, and it's hard, and you've got to learn those. So consistent care. We've recommended the caregivers, the family caregivers, go in and start that education process. Be there to help with the training in the home so that those caregivers really get to know your loved one. One of the last homes that I was at, they had a sign up in the room, turn arm this way, lift leg this way when positioning. So it's a communication that we have to have to get to know them, because it's going to be a difficult transition. I mean, moving is hard for those of us who don't have any care needs. And when you have specific needs, we try to help bridge those gaps and make it as smooth as possible.
We even ask specific questions. For instance, almost all of our ALS patients at some point in time will have some sort of respiratory equipment. Mm-hmm. And there may be a situation where their hands, arms get weak enough that they can't put that equipment on themselves. We need to make sure that the group home has a license that allows their staff to put that equipment on. Mm-hmm. So we've run into the situation where, you can have the respiratory equipment, but we can't touch it. Yeah. So we ask those kinds of questions, like, mm-hmm. Can you put this on this patient if they can no longer use their hands, or those sorts of things. So it's kind of something that you guys don't really have to worry about, because we're trying to do that for you, ask all of those kinds of questions. Mm-hmm. But I like to talk with the group home manager about, I'll just worst case scenario every aspect. Even if I don't think that patient is ever going to get to the point of needing this, that, or whatever it is, mm-hmm. I'm still asking the question, because what if, mm-hmm. right? I don't want them to say, well, we don't use Hoyers here, or, mm-hmm. and the thing about the power wheelchair, honestly, this is their rule on it, which stinks, but they don't want their walls beat up.
That is most
right.
Of it. Yeah.
That's what it comes down
floors
to.
Or yeah. And I will say, like, having having an advocate like Julia or myself, Janie, having someone guide you through this process. I mean, you might not think that you need someone like us, or there might be a group home down the road or that sort of thing. But there are really good ones, and then there are some that are not. And at the end of the day, they're a business, and these large communities are a business. So if you walk into the beautiful community across the street from your house, they may very well say, yes, 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 we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. And then when push comes to shove, here's the eviction notice, because they can't do that. So that's why we get involved early on to make sure. It's really hard when they tell you something, and then it's almost a switch bait that, we can't, because that's hard on everyone, and now you're out a lot of money, and so we don't want that.
And I'll just speak up here. I'm Taryn. I'm the CEO of ALS Arizona. I have used both of their services for my mom, and so what was so beneficial to me, I thought big facility, because I wanted her to have all these amenities. My mom had dementia, and so we found this facility. It was right before she would leave with memory care, so we thought we were going there, and we were all ready to move in. And then the nurse came out to do her assessment, and my mom needed a lot more care than what we had thought. And I called Rainey, because she'd been working with me. She had me 3 group homes within the hour to go visit, And so I went and found them, and I had not thought of a smaller group home. I wanted a pretty place for my mom. And we found the perfect group home, and it was a beautiful 10-bedroom house. The care that they provided was unreal. What they gave, my mom was bedridden, and so they were able to care for her. They did the changes, they did everything. They fed her, they loved her. The owner would send me pictures with my mom, and she would talk to me about the care. So when they talk about the difference in the smaller group homes, it was everything for us. And my mom has passed, but it was just such a great resource to have these two ready to call, and to get me 3 group homes within the hour, within 5 minutes of my mom's house, was incredible. And I will say I love them so much that I've given them my mother-in-law and father-in-law now. My mother-in-law and I'm so too, so you can imagine what we're dealing with. But godsend right here. So if you need anything, and Janie too. Janie had
Janie
told
is
me and
awesome.
told me the whole time, don't go for the big facility. And this is where we ended up. So please know that go out and look at these, take a look. Really, the smaller group home, from my opinion, was everything that we needed. They were wonderful. And like I said, to get pictures and follow up from the owner who was actually there, and I could pop by anytime. Didn't even have to announce it. They let me in like family. They're like, whatever you need, we are here for you. Ask everything about my mom. So that care was really what me and my brother wanted from my mom. So.
And that's what we look for. Like we said, there are thousands of them out there, but really the ones that we know are going to work with you, that are going to, they're going to care for your loved ones. You're going to be able to trust in that care. They're going to let Janie in to come do education. They're going to let you in after hours. Because, I mean, there are some that are pretty rigid, and there are some that aren't quite so nice, and, but we don't necessarily go to those.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a list of don't go back.
Yep.
For sure.
Yeah.
So just so you guys know too, Rami and Julia's services are free to you guys. So what they do and how they get paid is by the facilities, not for you. So I want you to keep that in mind as well. It's very good to, even I've had patients before, they're like, I'm not sure if I'm ready, but I've never seen a group home. Could I just maybe see a couple and know what it's really like so that I can think down the road? They have no problem taking you out and just showing you what a couple look like, or things like that, if you're starting to think about that. Obviously we can't say, well, in 6 months I want to go to place A, because we don't know what bed availability is going to be like. You could pick the best place that you want, but typically we're going to say, give us your 3 top options, because wherever there's a bed available, then we're going to pick that place or whatever. It is kind of like a skilled nursing facility in that sense. There just isn't a ton of availability all the time. I mean, just like an apartment, you don't just pick an apartment and they have one ready for you, but just so you know that their services are free to you guys. Likewise, when I go out and do any kind of education at the group home or whatever, that's a service that ALS Arizona provides for you guys, so you don't have to worry about that.
Their number before
Yes. Other questions? Okay, if you have any questions about whether you could potentially qualify for All-Tex or Access or those sorts of things, you need to be asking your social worker at your ALS clinic. She knows all of those answers and can help you with that paperwork. My recommendation is do not start that paperwork on your own. People that try that paperwork always get rejected if they do it themselves. So please let a social worker at least try to start you with that. Those services are for people that have lower income. One of the requirements is they are going to ask you for your financials, so you do have to disclose that sort of information. But if you think that you might be in a situation where you really don't have any money and do I maybe qualify for Access or All-Tex, then talk to your social worker about it. If you go to a ALS clinic that doesn't have a social worker, then we have one contracted with us here at ALS Arizona. Her name is Dawn. So She knows the ins and outs of that world as well. So if you're not sure, we can put you in contact with her and at least ask those questions.
And that's part of our process too, is
Yeah.
talking about, are there any veterans benefits? Is there a potential for all techs? You know, what does long-term look like? Yeah, we ask all that and provide the resources.
Yeah. So I'm going to pass out this home care resources list like I told you guys about. It's the short list of the facilities home care